in the past, I'm hearing the voice of my friend. No, it's true. We have many invisible friends and they're all online. So my name is Eric. I'm one of the, members here looking after this beautiful place, and wanted to welcome those I haven't seen this evening, and those who are online. It's a very special welcome. I think the beauty of tonight's program is not only to have an interfaith, but it's to interfaith our faith with all of us. And I just want to really welcome you all by honoring who you are individually, with your beliefs, with your thoughts, with your heart, with your mind, with your body, enriched with the food that some of you had earlier. And really to acknowledge that we're all amazing people, isn't it? Each individual is such an incredible story, living, sharing. And the faith that we hold in our heart is not just ours. It's one that we share. It's one that we live. And it's one that we want to honor by honoring the faith of everyone. And we're so happy that this place, the Brahma Kumaris Meditation Center in Montreal, that we call l'émergence, so to emerge our own inner beauty, can honor and welcome you all with the deepest respect, deepest love for who you are. And for me, my profession is on now documentary making, filmmaking, and public television. And I'm passionate about people. And I'm in love with people because each and every one has an amazing story to tell. So we're going to hear from a few of you, but feel free to, ask anyone their stories, because we all want to share our beautiful stories. So very, very warm welcome to Montreal, to Canada. Planet Earth, I think you've been here for a while, so it should be all right. But to Canada, for some of you, Montreal, l'Emergence, Brahma Kumaris, and welcome in our hearts, because this is where the evening is going to take place. That was my part. Now I'd like to invite a very good friend, Valériane, who came all the way from France as well. So she's one of our Brahma Kumaris representative and also member of what we call the green team here. So very welcome, Valériane, and I'll leave it to you.
Merci, Eric. Thank you very much. Tonight we have to talk slowly because we have a very dear friend who is translating in French. So maybe we'll have to remind you at some point. So I don't think you need to be welcome anymore. He did it so nicely. But tonight, this interfaith panel is also meant to give a bit more clarity to our friends who are not visible, and to those who are visible, who are in the room, about the kind of work we do. Because very often people look at me and say, what? Spirituality and climate change? Like if you said, an elephant in a china shop. And so this is something that I'm very happy to invite my friend Gopal to come and say a little bit the kind of work we are doing and why we're doing it. Gopal has been very active at coordinating and also getting a fantastic space for us at the COP this time, a pavilion, which is an amazing thing because at the climate COP, we are still trying. So please, Gopal, come and tell us a little bit more about why faith is important in this kind of UN gathering. And you can sit on the stool, you can sit on the chair. Yes.
Can I sit here? Is this okay if I sit here? Yeah, it's good to see. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you, Valeria and Eric and the Brahma Kumaris for having us. We came some of us came in October to Montreal when it was a little bit warmer to get a sense of the city. And we visited here for an afternoon, and Juan showed us around, and we experienced a beautiful hospitality as we have tonight. And Juan said that we'll be having an evening here during the conference. And so it's so beautiful to see it manifest and so many people coming out for it. So thank you to all of you here for organizing it for us. We are here as a multi-faith coalition at COP15, and we are in total about 30 to 40 different religious groups who are in Montreal for the conference over the course of the 2 weeks. But in total, over 55 organizations are kind of with us in person or in spirit, encouraging us to do the work that we're doing. I'll tell you what we're doing, and then I'll say why I think it's important. We have these negotiations are important that are taking place. 1 week is over, 1 week is remaining. And every single country is represented here in Montreal this week. And with the UN, they are trying to negotiate a global biodiversity framework, a new agreement for how to protect nature and biodiversity for the next decade. It's such a critical moment. We have lost 69% of all biodiversity globally in the last 50 years alone. And so the current rate of loss cannot be sustained. Otherwise, all of our lives and well-being is under threat. And so that's why this conference and these negotiations are so important. And so we, as a multi-faith coalition, over the last 2 years, have been tracking the negotiations and have put out our 6 main priorities that we would like to see come out of these negotiations and in this final document. And Dr. Alexandra Goossens-Ishii has been leading on our policy work, and she'll probably speak to that a bit later. But we have our 6 priorities. And in June, when we had our priorities, we sent it out to faith groups across the world, and we had 25 groups endorse the priorities. This time around, we had over 55 religious groups sign our priority document. And these groups, and it's no underestimate that these groups represent hundreds of millions of people of faith from right across the world: Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, Christians of all denominations. And so we are here, although our delegation is only 30 to 40 people, we are representing the hopes and the dreams of millions of people of faith from right across the world. And so that's why we are here, because we know, for those of us who've been doing the work for a long time, that the environmental crisis at its heart is a crisis of spirit, it's a crisis of the heart, it's a crisis of consciousness. And so in order to resolve those issues, the science, the technology, the money is all important. It's so critical we get all of those things in place. But that cannot be directed in the right direction if the spirit and the consciousness is not also directed in the right direction. And so we are here to talk about the spiritual, moral urgency to do this work. And every religious tradition, I would say, every religious tradition has within it a core belief that the world is sacred. Now, we may look at how that is sacred from different angles. And people often ask me, how is it possible you get the different religious traditions to agree? And I often give the example of a tree. I would say, if you look at a tree, or maybe this plant, a Hindu like myself would say, this plant is sacred because a soul lives in the plant. And the soul is there living, wanting to be free and happy, just as the soul is wanting to be free and happy in the body of a human. A Catholic would look at that plant and say, the plant is sacred because God created it. Now, we may have different understandings of why the plant is sacred, but at the end of the day, we can agree that this plant is sacred. And so therefore, and like the sun, we may say the sun is one name in one language and another name in another language, but ultimately it's the same sun. It's the same plant. It's the same divine. It's the same creation. And so we are coming here together in Montreal to say that regardless of our faith beliefs and teachings, despite the differences that may exist, and they do exist, we are united on this one thing, that the world is sacred. It is a gift. It is sacred because it is created by God. It is sacred because it is the body of God. And we are all responsible to care for that sacred body of God as our teachings compel us to do. And so that's why we're here taking those teachings, translating them into policy, advocating for a strong biodiversity framework. And so that's why we're here. And that's why I'm very grateful to work with the Brahma Kumaris and all the other faith traditions who are here with us over the next 2 weeks so that we can raise this moral voice.
Thank you, Gopal. It's a pleasure also to invite our other friends. We have 4 seats here. So I would like to invite Alexandra, Sister Maureen, our dear friend Hasma, and also Joy to go on stage. Please. So Joy is with WCC. I have been having the fortune of knowing her for quite a number of years. Hasna is a new friend. We've met each other, I think, but we never really interacted. Maureen is my sister from forever. And Alexandra has been a very dear friend also. We work together in Geneva. She's from the Buddhist faith. She's a Brahma Kumari. She's a Muslim. She's a Christian. To start with, I would have liked to give the word to Alexandra because as Gopal was reminding us, Alexandra has been tracking the negotiations. She's like the Sherlock Holmes of the interfaith at the negotiations. And she's amazing because she does it with a smile as if it was as easy as brushing a feather on your coat. That's how she is. So I would really like her to tell us a little bit more already. Gopal introduced very nicely, but you know, what's at stake for you, for us there, so that we are a little bit more awakened on the aspect of the negotiations and maybe what's so important. But then, like the other ones, I will ask you some questions more regarding your faith and your actions. The mic is here. You just pull it toward you. Je vais voir s'il est allumé.
Ça marche?
Ouais.
Oui.
So please do go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us for this panel. I'm very honored to be part of this event tonight. So yeah, Gopal introduced very well already where we are. Maybe so as a context, in the context of this convention on biological diversity, 10 years ago, a bit more than 10 years ago, they already adopted a strategic plan of action. And it was adopted, it was called the Aichi targets. And the result, there were, so the goal was to enhance protection of biodiversity and conserve. However, the result was that by 2020, when they were supposed to be achieved, none of them were achieved. So now they are negotiating this global, the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And maybe one of the key issues, so one of the key targets in Aichi was target 11, and it was about the percentage of land and marine areas that should be protected. And that time it was 17% that was agreed globally. And so the key point to really maybe respond to the urgency this at this time was, okay, we need to have a much higher percentage. Now the discussion between states is what should be that percentage. And the current discussion have led to, thank you very much. The current discussion have led to the proposal to have 30% around the globe. That leads to many discussion. Some countries not okay with that. Some others would like more, some would like less. But this is to be supposedly the, I would say, the key pillar, one of the key pillars. Although all the other targets, of course, are important. They touch on climate change, pollution, so cross-cutting issues, education, finance, of course, so various aspects, of course. And one of the key things, and that's also in our priority issues as a multi-faith coalition, one of the maybe takeaways from the Aichi targets was that in these targets, the rights of indigenous peoples, more specifically, and local communities were not part of that thinking. And of course, I mean, the history of conservation is complex, and for reasons of conservation, some indigenous peoples, local communities have also been evicted. So, but also in other areas, biodiversity has been protected. It's a complex history, but the main takeaway was that the main takeaway from the indigenous peoples and local communities is that they are already protecting and living in harmony with nature for many of them. And so that we should really enhance that, make it policy and support it. And so that is one, I guess, one of the main policy action for this global post-2020 global biodiversity framework, to ensure, and as Multi-Faith Coalition, we are absolutely amplifying and supporting the call from indigenous people and local communities to really have their right specifically to land and territories recognized in that framework, and then in other parts as well of the framework. As faith-based, we have also a priority area that relates to the web of life, and we really felt that it's important that the relationship, the interconnectedness, be in a way embedded in that framework, in a way that goes through maybe the mission, when the mission and the vision of that framework is going to be adopted and discussed, that truly that vision and mission to live in harmony with nature. So there is that priority, and in that interconnectedness, interrelatedness, we have had elements of priorities around cross-cutting issues as well. So that finance, actions to combat climate change, actions to combat pollution, that all of these are thinking in synergies and not in silos. Yes, so I think I'm going to stop here. We are in the middle of the negotiations. I think it's very difficult still, because just a few days ago, one state actually out of nowhere, not out of nowhere, it's really bargaining tools for, of course, money, investments and resource mobilization. But suddenly when that target 3, the 30% was negotiated, said, we don't want 30%, let's put 13%. So even less than Aichi, no? Everybody in the room was like, what's happening? What's happening? And so I guess that beyond these negotiations, there are lots of power relations. And I guess as faith people, we can really uphold in our hearts that hope with determination that it will really reach a strong and ambitious agreement for all of us, and for really the protection of biodiversity and nature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. I think we'll give you a little break and we'll have the Buddhist Alexandra speaking a little bit later so you can take a breath. It's my pleasure to ask our sister Maureen to speak to us tonight. I would like her to share with us in her perspective how the face of the Brahma Kumaris is related to biodiversity and nature, and what main actions have you seen us do to actually walk the talk on that.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you for that. We understand very much that there is a web of life that is very, very much interconnected. I think everyone would agree on that. And we know how interconnected nature is. And if there's even one thing, one species that may be lacking, that has an effect on many others. We understand that that web of life is held together not only that web of light is held together not only in terms of the natural and physical way in which life works, but it's, as was expressed earlier, the crisis that we're in is very much a spiritual crisis. And there's a dimension to that web of life, the spiritual dimension, that really has to be taken into account. And I know a concept that we've been sharing through COP15 so far and will continue to speak about is the concept of ecosynthesis. So, and that's used in different ways in different contexts. But if we're looking at, we understand that if we're looking at the whole web of life, it's not just the natural world, but it's consciousness is also part of that. And also the divine energy is also part of that. And that's very often the dimension that gets forgotten. And so if we're looking at the whole of nature and the whole of life, it has to take on this very cosmic dimension too. And that's important because whatever we are doing as human beings, however we are inside, whatever is our consciousness, that's absolutely having an impact on our values, our decisions, but also a direct impact on matter itself. And, you know, just in a very simple way, you know, actually, as you were talking about the plant, who was talking about Scopa, I felt like the plant was so happy. And I have to say, I'm one of those people who talk to my plants. I have lots of plants and I talk to them. And I know, oh yes, talking to plants, but actually, it's not just a joke. It's really real. Nature responds. Now you look at the violence in human consciousness and see what's happening in terms of nature. And there is a correlation. And I remember when I was in one particular environmental retreat, the question was asked, it's not so much what shall we do? The real question is, how shall we be? And we forget that. But in the being, if you do something with a very pure intention, invoking that divine energy with that connection, then the impact of what you do will be actually very far-reaching and will actually have a long-term impact. And at the moment, decisions that are taken with a very short-term lens. And in fact, the lens is very limited. And this is, I was at COP27 in Egypt too, and I was seeing that the only lens that the decision makers seem to have is the lens of finance. What about the rest of humanity? You're not going to get very far. It's not sustainable. I don't have to tell this group that. What about the lens of the sustainability of the earth? What about the lens of the benefit for the whole of humanity? And so I think this is really something that's very dear to our hearts, and as Brahma Kumaris, and the way in which we think about life and think about the ecosystem, that it really is a whole. It's our consciousness, it's nature, all the creatures, it's creation, and it's the creator. We talk about creation, don't forget the creator. So, and the divine energy has been missing from the negotiations, I have to say, but from our understanding. So I think that's how I would share our perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. And I think that bringing also this all art of spirituality, it kind of allows the mind and the intelligence to function differently.
You had asked about practical projects. And
it's okay.
I can say that later. Okay.
We have time, not an unending time, but I'm sure we'll have time. So I would love to hear you speak about the Muslim faith and how you can share with us the importance of biodiversity in your faith and how it has taken different practical actions in your life, your project, your organization.
Valerian, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about something a little bit different.
Fine, you talk about what you want.
You sent me a couple of options.
Yes, I did.
If that's okay.
And remember not to talk too fast. No. Our translator will send you blessings.
Okay. It's okay. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. Respected sisters, Valerian, Anita, Maureen, Juan, thank you for inviting us to your home in Montreal. Distinguished panelists, friends, brothers and sisters. I'd like to speak to you about how Muslims can support a flourishing future for our planet. The Quran tells us clearly to tame our greed and want. Whoever desires the harvest of the hereafter, we increase for him in his harvest. And whoever desires the harvest of this world, we give him thereof. But there is not in him, not for him in the hereafter any share. Quran, Ashura 20. At COP15, the focus is biodiversity and nature loss. And it's scary to imagine a triple crisis that we are facing. Everyone here today recognizes too clearly the interconnectedness of all who live on our planet and the impact of our actions in the past, the present, and in the future. Within religious traditions, including Islam, relations between humans and other elements of the natural world are not compartmentalized, but instead conceived of as being tied into a series of continuous spiritual interactions. I believe there are three things which we need to focus on if we're to achieve the flourishing future. Firstly, to acknowledge that our lives on this planet are for a finite time. Our blessed Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said it beautifully. He said, I am in this world like a rider who halts in the shade of a tree for a short time, and after taking some rest, resumes his journey, leaving the tree behind. Ahmed Tirmidhi. Secondly, knowledge. Knowledge is key, and the dissemination of that knowledge through advocacy, training, workshops, translations, etc., in a faith-sensitive manner will enable the ripple effect we need to build a faith movement on biodiversity and climate change. Narrated Abu Darda, he said, I heard the Apostle of Allah, peace be upon him, say, if anyone travels on a road in search of knowledge, Allah will cause him to travel on one of the roads of paradise. The angels will lower their wings in their great pleasure with one who seeks knowledge. The inhabitants of the heavens and the earth and the fish in the deep waters will ask forgiveness for the learned man or woman. The superiority of the learned man over the devout is like that of the moon on the night when it is full over the rest of the stars. Yeah. The learned are the heirs of the prophets, and the prophets leave neither dinar nor dirham, leaving only knowledge. And he who takes an abundant portion. Thirdly, community. This is the whole society approach that's been discussed the past week. We need to embrace this if we are to see the change we want. In the Quran 6:38, it states, there is no animal on the earth or any birds that wings its flights, but is a community like you. The community in Islam is not founded on race, nationality, locality, occupation, kinship, or special interests. It doesn't take its name after the name of a leader or a founder or an event. Is that slow enough for you? It transcends national borders and political boundaries. The foundation of the community in Islam is a principle which designates submission to the will of Allah, obedience to his law, and commitment to his cause. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a role model who showed us how to live sustainably and simply, respecting the earth and our fellow humanity. It taught us to consume moderately and avoid wasting precious natural resources such as water, even if on the banks of a flowing river. Ibn Majah. Now, the Islamic economy is very much community-based and is, I believe, a tool that can be utilized effectively to support the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework. The global pandemic has affected Muslim countries and Muslim businesses worldwide, just as it has impacted all communities. To build back better requires stronger collaboration and partnership, not only among Muslims, but also between Muslims and the wider community to ensure sustained recovery. Recovering from the pandemic provides a timely opportunity to also consider the role of biodiversity and sustainable development in pursuing a green reset. According to the State of the Global Islamic Economy Report 2020, more than 1.9 billion Muslims globally are spending over US dollars 2.02 trillion across 6 economic sectors, led by halal food, modest fashion, media, and travel. Islamic finance assets alone were estimated to be about $2.88 trillion in 2019, and Muslims are expected to spend 2.4 trillion by 2024. The pandemic has brought many challenges to the Islamic economy, such as disruption in the global supply chains, food security issues, and closure of borders. Despite a slight decrease in Muslim economic activities, the global Islamic economy is underpinned by strong economic drivers. On the demand side, Muslim demographic is expected to reach 3 billion by 2060, representing 1/3 of the global population, according to Pew Research Center. It's interesting that an increasing emphasis on ethical and sustainable consumption is now being popularized by millennials and Gen Zs. On the supply side, proactive Muslim governments such as Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and UAE are increasing regulation and certification of halal products. Several countries have introduced national Islamic economic strategies, such as Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Kuwait, and Qatar. Now, my final point. Sorry. My final point is about our intentions. If we all have good intentions, we can make change happen for the good. Truly, in the body, there is a morsel of flesh, which if it be sound, all the body is sound, and which if it be diseased, all of it is diseased. Truly, it is the heart. Al-Bukhari, Muslim. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm an interpreter, and I know that when some people read, it's more difficult to follow, but thank you so much for bringing your tradition up front for us. Now we have Joy. So we would like you to share with us, according to your experience of Christianity and your the way you live it, how is Christianity related to promoting biodiversity, protection, and restoration? And also maybe speak to us about a few of the actions that you have been supporting. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you very much. And the first thing I want to say is that you should know that Valerian, along with my colleague Henrik Grappa from Sweden, co-chair what we call the Interfaith Liaison Committee to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It is in relationship with the Secretariat. And I tell you, they keep us really on track. So it's a delight to be able to recognize that with your colleagues and friends, Valerian. It's very, very important work. So it's a big question. And I would start for the rest of the people here to say welcome to Canada. If you aren't from Canada, I'm just a Canadian, a Canuck, as we sometimes say. We would normally, and some people did in the circle earlier, identify the people whose traditional territories we are working on or visiting or even just having in our hearts. And in Toronto, I would say I'm from what used to be known as Takaranto, now Toronto, and that we also would say this is in what is now called Canada, sometimes so-called Canada. And so you may hear that as you join conversations in Montreal now. I never get the word right in Montreal. I'm going to stumble on it. Jajange, something, but that's not right to my ear because I don't know Mohawk. But in Toronto, I live on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Huron, and the Anishinaabe, and also in the Treaty 13 of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And that's really important as we open meetings. We identify that because these are the people who preserved these lands for millennia, for time immemorial. And the fact that we can still walk on these lands and breathe and have livelihoods on these lands is very important. And it's a sacred tradition. It's a religious principle that we hold as we work forward in the areas of truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And we're seeing that more and more around the planet. But we're walking very slowly, as we would say, walk a mile in my moccasins, and to understand a little bit more about who you are today in this time and place in this creation. So in the churches, now I can speak for the Canadian churches particularly because I've worked for many decades with them, but they're just one small part of the World Council of Churches, which is incredibly diverse. And I mean, it's massive. We had an assembly this August in Germany, and we got to look each other in the eyes again after about 11 years, not being able to. So the work of the council is to try to uphold and uplift spiritual traditions, spiritual practices in community across very, very divergent theologies. And that's good because God made a diverse world. Within our own spiritual traditions, there are great diversities as well. And so with people, we're trying to find ways to have common articulation, common, I won't say understanding, because everyone's understanding is somewhat different, but a common direction of putting our spiritual practices together. And it is not easy, but it's enriched very, very much by ongoing, what shall I say, issue-driven areas where people can say, as you do at the UN, we may not agree on everything, we may not agree on the hows, but we can agree that this is an important thing that must be dealt with. We can come at it from, as Gopal was saying about the plant, and I'm actually a tree lover, and I talk to the trees in my neighborhood and make films about them and make my grandchildren hug them and climb them, and they think I'm a bit nuts but the way we approach things is always going to be different from one person to the next. And so it's how do we find ways to act in love and in harmony with each other? That's a way we then learn to act in love and in harmony with other beings, with other spirits, with the planet itself. Now, Christians are people of the book. And one of the things that has been most important in my work over decades in ecological justice has been to see the here's this awful word, intersectionality, which we hear a lot these days, but it's the confluence of issues of whether it's, the model that we're working with right now, of course, is the Sustainable Development Goals and how they all develop a comprehensive kind of package so that you can't really talk about ecological justice just about climate change, just about water, just about poverty, just about lack of education, just about drought or floods, or, you have to look at the whole picture. And it is, as you were saying, Maureen, cosmic in that way. So there's a framework we have that we can try to utilize, and we can put words around it. So it becomes a book, an articulated vision, which is what I think we're trying to do with the global biodiversity framework. Now, as people of the book, sometimes I have to go back and think, okay, what is motivating? What is moving us from a very comfortable pew? There was that wonderful book back in the 60s, The Comfortable Pew, which caused all kinds of uproar in the Christian community, I can tell you. But it basically said, get off the pew, the comfortable pew. And so for me, it really came home on last Sunday. I was back in my own home parish where I hadn't been for a couple of months because of travel and COPs and things like that. And the reading was about John the Baptist, the baptizer, who said to who would be the politicians of the day and the scholars, he called them the scribes and Pharisees. He said, you're a bunch of snakes, you're a bunch of vipers. You break God's law. And so you say that you're changing your ways. You say that you're, this word is metanoia, turning from your ways. Show me the evidence. And so that's a prophetic voice that says to the politicians of the day, to those that are the policy makers, show me the evidence. We hear lots of wonderful words in COPs. If you read the Paris Agreement, for example, it's full of wonderful language. But here we are. How far have we come since Paris? How much of that is even implemented? Are we seeing the metanoia? Are we seeing the turning? Because we're in a time of a great turning. And as this turns, it can hit roadblocks. It can go off course. As things turn, it's not always a smooth turn. But we do need to dig back into the wisdom of our traditions, the wisdom of our current interpretations of those traditions, and to find the language that can help the turn be towards a safer, healthier, more sustainable, and just future. Because without justice, there's no peace. Without justice, there's really no survivable future on this planet. Indigenous peoples have been telling us this for a long time, and it's time we believed them. It's time that their voices became predominant in leading us into a much better place. And so this is a lesson we're learning in Canada, that we've been so blinded and so foolish as colonizers. How do we now? And this is what the churches and the World Council of Churches have been moving towards, the whole understanding of decolonization. We think we need a decolonization of all of society, not just here in Canada, but of the global society, so we can get to a green, livable future.
And earlier on that I have a very good friend who is a Quaker working on the parallel between decolonization, colonization, and climate change. So thank you for bringing this to the conversation. I would like now to allow my friend here to give us a spiritual outlook on Buddhism and biodiversity. And then after that, I have another friend in the room, Lisa, who is a conservationist. And I mean, she's an amazing person. So we don't have 5 seats, but I'm sure she doesn't care. She's a yoga teacher, so she might speak on top of her upside down. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll give you that chair. Thanks very much for everything that was shared. It was very inspiring, which also makes me think it's just a small digression, but there was a nature culture summit also today and taking place also tomorrow. And many Indigenous people's voices were represented, very powerful speakers. Appreciated a lot the standpoint from Canada, civil society. I feel that there is, I don't know enough of how the government and all that is, but I feel from the many people I've met, there is a true will to face history to really and to take action. So yeah, thanks very much for everything that was shared. So I guess also from the Buddhist tradition, there are many, as many other traditions, there are many traditions as well within Buddhism. From my own tradition, so maybe there are 2 things I think I keep and I wanted to share. One I shared already in a previous event. It's the metaphor or parable of Indra's net. So it's in one of the sutras. At some point, there is an image of this net that is around the palace of God Indra, but that is around the world. And all the knots of the net are actually gems, jewels, which are gathering the lights of all the other jewels that are on the surrounding knots, and also reflecting. And that this symbolizes, or it's a metaphor, no, to show that all phenomena, every single phenomena is contained within all others. So that's one of the ways to show and I guess describe this interconnectedness. And when we take that from maybe a human being action perspective, it's also then you can have a positive impact too. By pulling one part of the net, actually everything moves too, even if you don't always see it. And the second thing that is a principle from my tradition in Japanese, the concept of oneness of life and environment. In Japanese, it's called Esho Funi. Esho means self and environment. Funi means two, but not two. And so for me, I really like that a way of transcribing the oneness of self and environment, in that it does seem we're two, but at the much deeper level, it's one thing. And that's a principle that I really use in my daily life to come back to when I feel powerless or when I feel disconnected, to really come back to deeply we are connected. So by being myself, by also transforming myself, I have an impact. There is an impact. And maybe, so one thing I wanted to share in terms of, so then within my tradition, there is another principle that we focus a lot, which is called a human revolution. And it's encouraging ourselves to really operate that transformation and to take action for ultimately our own happiness and the happiness of all the environment. And there is this young man in France whom I know. And so it's just a small story, but that shows for me one of the individual actions in relation to protecting the environment. And so he was living in a city and he's still living in that city. And he was very angry at seeing all the waste on the floor when he was just walking from home to work. And it was making him angry, really angry and sad, but very angry. And he felt really powerless. And so that's where he, as a Buddhist, went back to his own Buddhist practice and really said, what can I do? And the first thing that what he described when we were speaking, it was really, so he was chanting, and he was wondering, okay, what can I do? And what he said is that there was that moment where he transformed within his heart, the moment where he felt powerless to, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to take action. And then he continued back home to work. And on that day, he decided to just pick up the trash on the floor that he would be seeing. And that gave him a lot of joy. And I guess that's start of process of self-empowerment when we reconnect, and step by step. So he started to do that. He did it more and more. He talked. Oh, sorry. Yes. He talked with friends, and then he started to research whether there were associations that were interested in treating waste and what was available. And so he connected to the Zero Waste Association in France that was known in his city. So he decided to create the antenna for his city. He started alone, and then it grew, and they organized the first Zero Waste Festival. It went from small events to small events, but within 1 year, they organized the first Zero Waste event, which was joined by 500, I think, volunteers, and they picked up a lot of trash. And then they, step by step, they've used that to do some awareness raising about the way we consume, etc. But, and now he has moved to new projects and he works for urban forests. But what was very inspiring to me was that when we discussed, it was that out of his own change, just so much was created too. And I guess that would be one of the center of many teachings and many traditions, actually, I guess, but also from Buddhist perspective, that taking action, changing oneself so that it contributes to the change outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My mic has lost his wig. Here it is. So, Liza, we have a very special seat for you. You do. Please come and sit. So, Liza is a good friend. She is working with IUCN, and for many years they have given us a home. They still are giving us a home for the platform of the interface with climate change. It's a little bit of a broken home at the moment, but we are still hoping for the best. But she also has done an amazing interfaith work. She's actually interfaith herself. She does yoga. She's also, I think, a martial art person, and she's also working on conservation of sacred sites. And I know many other things, but I think it's better that she tells you about it.
Thank you, Valeriane. And hi, everybody. Om Shanti. It's true that you said welcome home when we came in the door, and I really feel at home with Brahma Kumari. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody here. I'm not going to talk for very long because it just hit me there when I was sitting. I thought, well, maybe there's something I could offer you. So I quickly ran to the bathroom to see if I had any music in my phone. So I'm sorry. So, and apologies as well. I have a Scottish accent. So if you can't get... Thank you. Désolé tout le monde. Anyway, so it's a pleasure to be here. I'll just compliment a little bit what Valeriane already said. I'm actually the director of a small organization called Diverse Earth, and we work at that very special interface between nature, culture, and spirituality. And so we're looking at a wide range of really amazing things, such as sacred natural sites and also sacred species. But basically, if you look at it, we're looking at where relationships are still whole and therefore holy. And I think conservation is really about mending, healing relationships, because we have somehow broken those through the years in terms of our probably very wrong perceptions of difference, difference between me and the other, between people and nature. Conservation organizations actually perpetuate that myth that there's a divide between people and nature. And so I remember in one of the World Parks Congresses in Durban in 2003, Indigenous peoples were there, had a strong voice. And after one presentation, I remember one of them coming to me and saying, they're all missing the point. And they're still today, and these weeks, they're still missing the point. So all that we can do is keep trying, because there will never be transformation unless there's inner transformation and therefore outer transformation. So I'm not going to speak anymore. If you will, I would like to offer a dance. So I'm also a dancer of Bharatanatyam. And I haven't performed in a while because of COVID, so you will excuse me. I'm also not prepared for it, but if somebody could lend me a long scarf. Thank you. So the only thing I could find was a pushpanjali. So a pushpanjali is the offering of flowers. Anyway, it's a very short dance, and hopefully you'll like it.
We'll love it.
So maybe if you could fish back a little tiny bit. I think I haven't put it up very loud either. So, yeah, put it right up. Let me know. Okay.
झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झिम तरित झिम झिम किटत कधीम तधीम तधीम तकधिनताम झित झित तगणक झित झित तगणक झित तगणक झित तगणक झित झित तजम झित झित तगणक झित झित तगणक झित तगणक झित तगणक झित झित तजम झित झित तगणक झित झित तगणक झित तगणक झित तगणक तगणक झित झित तगणक झित झित तगणक झित तगणक झित तगणक तगणक यम तक चम चम तरि किट तक तरि किट तक चम तक चम चम तरि किट तक तरि किट तक ताति तो नम जम तो गीता जम किट ताति तो नम जम तो गीता जम किट तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक ओम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक नम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक ओम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक नम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक ओम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक नम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक तळांगु तक तरि किट तक ओम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक नम तळांगु तक तरि किट तक किट तक taka nam nam kita taka kita taka dik kita taka tum kita taka nam kita taka tadigina to tadigina to tadigina to dik kita taka tum kita taka nam kita taka taka tadigina to taka tadigina to taka tadigina to tum kita taka nam kita taka taka diku tadigina to taka diku tadigina to taka diku tadigina to jim tarita jim jim kita taka jim tadim taka dinatam jim tarita jim jim kita taka jim tadim taka dinatam jim tadim taka dinatam jim tadim taka dinatam.
So this is fantastic. That's what happens when the children feel at home. They dance. So thank you for feeling at home. This is actually the end of our evening. So thank you for your presence, for what you brought. Each one of you was very special. And I'm very glad that we have such friends.